Welcome back to another Film Geek video. Today I am talking about 5 obscure films from the 80s. Now, these are 5 movies in no particular order. This is not a rankings video. In fact, I've also chosen 5 films from the 80s that are all in different types of genres. So I've got a family film on here, I've got an action film, I've got a horror film. I tried to cover the spectrum here, okay? So that's where we're going. I guess I take that back. I don't have an action film. I've got more of a culty film, and then a really weird sci-fi, a horror film that you might not have heard of, and a family film that might not have some acceptable parts for a PG movie these days. Alright guys, so let's get down to it, shall we? As I said, this is in no particular order whatsoever. Let's start off with my first film I want to talk about, 1984's Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger is directed by Richard Franklin, and it's starring Henry Thomas and Dabney Coleman. This film tells the story of a boy who gets caught up in real espionage spy stuff. And it's all because of video games and tabletop RPGs. Now, I know the movie War Games came out before this film, but this was really the first movie that I saw as a kid that had video gaming, tabletop RPG elements, and like a whole real fun spy adventure all thrown into one thing. I loved watching this movie when I was a kid. So anyways, it tells the story of this kid, played by Henry Thompson, that gets kind of thrown into this whole spy world, right? So he's hanging out with his game shop owner buddy. Yes, a grown man hanging out with children because, you know, 80s. Anyways, his buddy has him go pick up some games or something. I forget exactly what it was. Oh, that's right, some pamphlets about some new upcoming games that are coming out at this local game distributor. So they go over to this office. Of course, these are 2 kids just traveling around. I think it's in Dallas. It's Houston or Dallas, I can't remember. Just 2 kids, you know, like 10 and 7, just hopping on the bus, riding around the downtown area of some Texas large metropolitan city. You know, kid stuff in the 80s. Anyways, so these 2 kids go over to this distributor, they get the flyers and all, and while they're there, Henry Thompson's character goes into the back stairwell because, you know, whatever. He's taking the stairs up because he's super spy, just playing around and all because they're kids. So anyways, goes up into the stairs, and a real scientist gives him this cartridge. And it is a video game cartridge, but it has some top secret spy information on this game cartridge, and it's entitled Cloak and Dagger, which happens to be this kid's favorite video game series. So he, of course, rushes over to the video game guy to tell him about it. They find out that there's stuff inside of it. He decides he's going to tell his dad because his dad is military. His dad doesn't believe him. Oh yeah, there's also this whole imaginary friend thing that goes on. He has an imaginary friend who's also a super spy, and the super spy looks like his dad, so the Dabney Coleman plays the dad and the super spy. Did you get all that? Anyways, guys, this is a really fun childhood favorite of mine that I almost forgot about, and one day I was just wandering around the old Walmarts as we do, and I came across this Blu-ray, this is just DVDs, this DVD collection, and right there in the corner I saw Cloak and Dagger, and let me tell you guys, my mind just went bloom. I remembered so much about this film, and sitting down watching it just took me back to a different time. This film is a lot of fun. It is very 80s. You might not find it necessarily massively appropriate for kids today. Like I said, there is a bit of violence for a PG movie for today's sensibilities. But maybe you're young at heart and you just want to be taken back to the 80s yourself, to a simpler time where people openly shot guns at children in waterways. If you're curious about this film and you want to check it out also, I found out that you can find it right now for rent on YouTube and Amazon Prime. Next up is not such a family film whatsoever. This one falls more into almost exploitation category, and that is the 1983 film Suburbia. Suburbia is directed by Penelope Spheeris, and it's produced by the great Roger Corman. Look up Roger Corman's career at some point and find out exactly how many amazing directors this man helped start. It is unreal. Martin Scorsese is one of them. This film is starring Chris Pedersen and Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but he's known as Mike B. the Flea in the credits of this film. Yes, the Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is in this film. Now, he doesn't have a huge part, but he is definitely there, and he is not hard to pick out whatsoever, because that man has not changed in like the last 45 years. Now, this film is not a perfect movie. This is not some amazing, deep, dark, documentary style film. This is borderline exploitation, as I said. This movie is dirty, it's grimy, it's extremely unsanitized. It tells the story of a group of suburban punk rockers in the suburbs of LA that are living in an abandoned house in a suburb that was kind of being torn down, I guess. I forget exactly how it is, but anyways, it's a completely abandoned neighborhood, and these punk rockers have taken over a house, and there's a bunch of them living in there. This movie tackles on subjects that just weren't talked about in this time period. We talk about drugs, like heroin addiction, and just the brutalities of living on the streets, and also diving into the punk rock scene of Southern California or Southern LA or something like that. It is really just almost a documentary style film, but it's a dramatization. And here's the thing, guys. You really have to get past the really, really bad acting in this film, and then you'll find something really interesting. And this is also another type of movie that is, again, very not of it's not too great with the sentiment of today. Let's just put it that way. This film is going to agitate you, it's going to anger you, and it's going to offend you. But it's designed to do that. So the fact that it can pull those emotions out of you, and it might disgust you in some areas. This is definitely a watch. If you're curious about the punk rock scene of the 80s, this is a good dramatization that kind of shows you what things were like in that time period. I was really young during this time. I was like 8. Okay, I was 8. Now, I was into like watching MTV and all of that stuff and cartoons and all. But later, when I was in my early teens, I found this back in my skateboarding days, and I thought these guys were like my freaking heroes. And going back and watching it this as an adult, I'm just like, someone needs to get some parenting. So if you're curious about this film, you can find this movie streaming for free. I found it on Tubi, Pluto, and Peacock with a subscription. There is also a DVD out there too if you're into the collecting of the physical media. Our third film on this list is a lighthearted film that doesn't end on such a lighthearted note, and that is 1982's The Last American Virgin. The Last American Virgin comes off as just another good old-fashioned 80s teen sex comedy. But then, near the end of this film, it starts to turn into a much darker, much more dramatic film, and then leaves you with one hell of a what the fuck moment at the end of this movie. This film is directed by Boaz Davison, and it's a remake of another film that Davison made in Israel in 1978 called Lemon Popsicle, which has a similar plot, but of course takes place in Israel, and I believe it takes place in the 1950s, where this film takes place in the 1980s. Other than that, pretty much just a very similar storyline. One of the things I really enjoy about this film is the way it's shot. Most of the movie is filmed with a handheld cam, and it doesn't bounce around or get gross or nauseous or anything like that, but it does add just a slight floatiness to the film that kind of gives you a feel like you're going along with these guys on their escapades. This movie is also very, very, very 80s. Oh my god, this movie will show you the side of the 80s that you are familiar with. The crazy hairdos, the fun flashy fashions, the bright colorful things. This film has it in droves. I mean, the main character drives around a pizza delivery station wagon that's pink with a big pizza chef looking thing up on top of it. This is a really fun, just relatable type of characters film. It was something that was very popular in the 80s, but as I also said, this film is kind of different than a lot because it does really take a dark turn in the third act. The tone of the movie completely shifts. It stops being such a wacky, fun, just jolly old time, and it really starts taking on some very heavy subject matter. So if this film sounds like it's right up your alley, unfortunately, at this time, I couldn't find it on any streaming services. but you can find it on physical media like I did right here. This is one of those 80s movies box sets, and it really isn't a half bad quality of film, honestly, on one of these sets. I love stuff like this because I can get a lot of movies in one set, and it's great for a person who has limited space, let's just put it that way. And a lot of the times these old 80s films anyways, they're already kind of a grainy film, so honestly it doesn't really matter if it's in a 10 whatever or 4K or whatnot, at least in my opinion. And honestly, guys, it takes me back to the old days anyways. I kind of like a little bit of grain and grime in my old 80s films because that's just how I grew up with these movies. I used to watch these films like on recorded VHS most of the time from HBO, and I would wear these goddamn movies down. Now, something like Last American Virgin, I found that one a little bit later when I was in high school, but it's always been a movie that the ending just stuck with me. So if that sounds like something you're into, check that one out. Number 4 on our list, we are getting into the weird and strange world of the 80s, and that's 1982's Liquid Sky. Liquid Sky is directed by Slava Tokerman, and I'm sorry if I got that name wrong, I tried my best. Anyways, this film is part of the new wave movement that was found in both music and in different forms of media, one being film. And this film is, oh my god, is it perfect for just saying what new age anything was like in the 80s. This film is bonkers. So this is the story, I shit you not. It tells the story of teeny tiny aliens that come down on a spaceship in like a legit flying saucer. And when I mean teeny tiny, it looks like they land on someone's grill on a patio. And guess what these aliens are after? Heroin. Yeah, they need some heroin. But then they find out that human endorphins, they also give the exact same effect as heroin. So what happens, they find this 80s model who's really big in new wave world and so on and so forth, and guess what she has? Well, it's the 80s. She has lots of cocaine and heroin. But they find out that endorphins also help power their ships or planet or whatever reason they need endorphins by her partner's orgasms. Yep. They just kill them when they orgasm, and they turn into something like aluminum foil. It's kind of wild. There's like this really cool lights effect and everything, and then the person just kind of goes, and it turns into like aluminum foil. But yeah, legit, that's what this is. This is aliens coming down for some heroin, and then they get the same effect from somebody having an orgasm. Now look, I'm not trying to say this movie is for everybody, but if you want to definitely experience a film that is not like anything you're going to see too awful much, then this is definitely your film. Now this movie at this point in time is only found on physical media, so I have right here the Vinegar Syndrome cut on Blu-ray, and let me tell you folks, this is the way to go to watch this movie. I have seen it pop up on Prime, and it has a really nice looking cut on Prime. It's probably the same one as this. Now, like I say, this is a very, very niche kind of film. I'm not expecting everyone to like this thing. And another thing about this movie too is it's got a really oddball soundtrack. And you're going to either love the music in this movie or you are going to hate the music in this movie. There is just no other way. This film also has just an absolutely amazing color palette with all the different costuming and everything else. And all of the clothes that they wear, they were repurposed and redesigned. But all of the fabric and everything they use for all the costumes, they just picked all that stuff up at thrift stores. I mean, this movie had a teeny tiny little budget, and for it to look this amazing, I can't believe it had such a tiny budget. The clothing, the design, everything, the look, the makeup, this film just has such an amazing look to it. However, low budget can sometimes have not the best acting, and this film is something, to save on the money, they hired, very new, inexperienced actors to be in the movie, and it does, it shows, but it's still an extremely interesting and weird just watch. Like this is part of the new wave movement. Another director that was part of that movement was Jim Jarmusch. He's pretty much the only one of them that really, I don't know, in my opinion, did anything after the movement ended. So if this is something that sounds up your alley, definitely check out Liquid Sky, found on physical media. That brings us to number 5, our final film. And of course I'm going to talk about a 1980s slasher film because That's what I like. I love 80s slasher films. So I chose one that you might not have heard of, and that is 1981's Final Exam. Final Exam is written and directed by Jimmy Houston, and it tells the story of a group of college students who are being stalked by a nameless killer for no good reason whatsoever. And that's something I absolutely love in a horror film, especially my slashers. I love it when they just show up and they start killing people and no one knows why. They're just pissed off at the world and everyone is dying that's in their path. Now, in continuing with pretty much every one of these movies that I've mentioned on here, of course this film has a scene, or at least a couple of scenes, that didn't age quite well. In fact, there's a few moments in this movie that really didn't age quite well, and one is this one that I'm about to show you, and maybe or maybe not these photos are going to be allowed up on YouTube. I don't know, because this film stages a shooting. Yes, that's right. You see, this film takes place during the final exams at this local college, and the students there don't necessarily want to take their final exams. So a local frat, the Gammas, that's really all they ever call them, these Gammas decide, you know what? We're going to stage a shooting, and that's how we're going to get out of our final exam. And dang, man, that is something that surprises the hell out of you to see in today's world. You're just watching this movie, and all of a sudden there's a freaking shooting that opens up in 1981, and you're just like, the fuck am I watching? Now, if you're a fan of the 1978 Halloween, then you're probably going to enjoy this film because it is a straight up clone of that movie. There's so many beats that are identical, so many. At the very beginning of the movie, where the slasher is stalking his prey, a lot of the same tricks are used. He pops up in the background. He has a black van in one of the scenes. He drives behind a couple of the ladies where he's stalking the soon-to-be final girl, and we'll get to her. So it does all of those beats, and it follows everything. The women in this film are also very much like the women, the babysitters in Halloween, also the way they banter and all. It's the same type of tropes and everything that were found in that movie are pretty much identical in this film, although it has some really amazing kills. It is a clone, but it has its really fun and entertaining moments. Now, this film does kind of start off a little slow while our slasher is stalking his prey, but believe me, once it starts, and this film has a pretty decent sized body count. There's a lot of kills in this film, none of which are too awful bloody or gruesome, but they're all pretty well orchestrated. And as I mentioned, our slasher doesn't wear a mask in this film, and he does a pretty good job, or at least the filmmakers do a pretty good job of obscuring his face throughout most of the film. Now, I'm sure that it worked a lot better back in the old VHS that I watched it on, because I don't remember ever being able to see the killer's face. But when you watch it on the nice crystal clear Blu-ray that was put out by Shout Factory, yeah, there's a good amount of scenes that you can see that guy's face clean as day, but that's okay. It doesn't ruin the film whatsoever. It's still a lot of fun. I just really enjoy the whole ambiguous killer setup in a slasher film. Now, our victims in this movie, they're pretty much cannon fodder. We don't really care about anybody in this movie. Even the final girl really isn't that spectacular. You're not really rooting for her to get away. You're just like, oh, okay, so she's the last one. She's probably going to make it. Here we go with the whole chase. Let's go. Let's see what happens from here. You don't really connect with any of them. And in fact, most of them are just dicks. I mean, they're all these frat guys from that Gamma frat that pulled the shooting. And so you're just like, oh, there goes another one. Oh, well, bye. And despite its silly and campy acting, this film still delivers a really fun, just slasher romp that if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth a watch. And if you are a subscriber to Shudder, you can check it out right now on your streaming service, or you can just go out and get this Blu-ray like I did for, you know, the hell of it if you're a collector. Well, there you have it, guys. 5 obscure films from the 80s. I really hope that you guys find some enjoyment out of these movies. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you haven't. I hope you try to find them and watch them, because I think these films have some value and we need to keep them around just a little bit longer. Well, alright guys, thanks again for checking out The Film Geek. If you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.